Mr. Meknil, reason for your visit to Macedonia is to improve the work of the Public Prosecutor Office. You had the opportunity to talk with them in the past days, so what is your key message that you told to the public prosecutors here in Macedonia?
Right. So, first let me say what a pleasure it is to be back in Skopje. I spent a fair amount of time here in 2017 and 2019 and got to know the people in the country well during that time and left part of my heart here. So it's really great to be back. Secondly, I suppose I should say that I didn't come really to deliver a message, any particular message. What I came here to do is to meet with prosecutors and judges to share on a peer-to-peer basis experiences that I've had in the United States and experiences that I've had here in North Macedonia. And through that sharing to learn from each other about best practices. And oftentimes when I make trips like this, I bring home more than I've left behind, so it's really a pleasure to be here for that reason. So I think what the sort of general themes that I've tried to convey over a number of days are several-fold. The first, and maybe the most important, is asking our prosecutors and the judges here to embrace change. You know, the world is changing around us. And today's North Macedonia is different than it was certainly when I was here 4 years ago. And the public is asking us to do different things. And we need to adapt to that. We need to respond to that while still holding true to our principles. And then the other things, these other two things go hand in hand. The first is transparency, and the other is integrity. And those two themes are a lot about what we discuss when we talk about combating organized crime and combating corruption. Because the integrity of the judges and the prosecutors are absolutely essential to effectively combating these crimes. The integrity of the justice system is absolutely essential to the public trusting that we're going to do our jobs correctly. And on transparency, it's fundamental that the media and the members of the public can see everything that we are doing and understand why we're doing it and what the results are. So those are a couple of the themes I shared.
Okay, your focus is on cases related to crime and corruption. In your experience, what do prosecutors need to successfully fight high corruption?
My prosecutor friends here are going to like me for this because I'm going to say what I know is the first thing they would say, which is adequate resources. By that I mean you need to pay prosecutors adequate wages. And you need to pay judges adequate wages for a lot of reasons. But one, because if you don't pay them adequate wages, no one respects them. And two, if you don't pay them adequate wages, then they become subject to pressures which they should not be subject to, whether they're financial pressures or political pressures. So you must remunerate or pay prosecutors and judges well. And you also need to provide adequate resources in terms of specialized investigators. Right? So not every investigator, there's some terrific investigators in North Macedonia, not every investigator has the sophistication or the ability to investigate some of these really complicated crimes. And so you need to have a specialized group of well-trained investigators. And then, of course, you need the kind of equipment. Monitoring equipment, phone downloading equipment, that kind of equipment to support these cases and to preserve that evidence. And then there's one more thing that is as important as adequate resources, and that is insulation from interference. Prosecutors and judges who are combating organized crime and public corruption need insulation from outside influence. And that is absolutely critical. And the reason why I talk about those two crimes together is because they're like brother and sister. Organized crime and public corruption, they go hand in hand, and they thrive in the dark. And that's why you need transparency and integrity and adequately paid prosecutors and judges.
The situation in the United States on this topic is very better. So much better. How do the prosecutors earn the trust of the public?
I think the first thing that prosecutors need to remember, and judges too, is that they're public servants. And it's critical that you never lose sight of that idea. That you are serving not necessarily a government, you're certainly not serving a politician, you're serving the public. And you need to keep in mind with humility that that's your fundamental job. And then, of course, how do we gain and then maintain that trust? Integrity, transparency. You know, our touchstone has to be ethics and honor, and we have to do it in a very open way so the public knows what we're doing.
What has your 20 years of experience taught you? Which cases have been the most challenging for you personally?
Well, a couple of things. You know, 20 years of experience with a teacher. It's taught you a lot of things, some of which I'm glad I learned, and others I'm not so glad. But anyway, the first one is that no system is perfect. You know, that all of our systems of justice are imperfect. And I've served in not just the United States and then spent some time in North Macedonia, I spent some time in Great Britain, and I've had the opportunity to interact with colleagues in countries across the world. And I know that no system is perfect. But maybe the most important lesson I've learned in 20 years of practice is that as a lawyer as a lawyer, I have the best job anyone could have as a prosecutor. And I'll tell you why, and particularly in the United States. I get to wake up every morning and say to myself, I'm going to go do the right thing. And I can go do the right thing all day long. And at the end of the day, I can come home and see my children and said, I did the right thing today. And that, when you're in a system, a rule of law, is an unbelievable privilege and a pleasure. So maybe that's the most important lesson I've learned.
You already mentioned, but how important it is for public prosecutors to not fall under political influence?
You know, it's funny that's even a question, right? I mean, why would you even need to ask that question? So the first thing again is that, as I mentioned before, so prosecutors, it's critical that prosecutors don't mistake being responsive to the public and listening to what the public wants and being subject to political influence. Those are two very, very different things. So as prosecutors and as judges, we need to be attentive to the evolving standards in our communities, and when we exercise our discretion, we need to keep in mind how it's going to affect the man and woman on the street. And how they perceive us, right? So that's you know, so it's important for them to be attentive to public sentiment. But by contrast, it is absolutely critical that they are insulated from political interference, because you will never be trusted if you let that influence you. And to the extent that any political influence has an impact on your decision, and you respond to that, you're betraying your oath of office, you're betraying your colleagues, and you're betraying the system of justice and the rule of law. So there needs to be a very solid wall between politics and justice.
Have you personally have such an experience?
I haven't, and I have to say that I'm proud I can say that. I prosecuted for years many public corruption cases in the United States, and I never initiated a case against either a prosecutor or a judge in that period of time. So I didn't experience it personally. But I know what I do. I know what I would do if I did experience that, and that is I'd pick up the phone and I'd report it immediately. And I'd report it as high up the chain in the Department of Justice as I could, and I am confident that if I did that, I would get the right response. So, and that's, again, part of the privilege of working in a place like the Department of Justice in the United States.
Mr. Meknil, thank you for this interview.
It was really my pleasure. Thank you for having me.